Hey guys, Wels Knight here, and welcome back to another episode of Magic the Gathering Arena. Today we are going to be covering what all the various abilities on creatures means. I'm not going to go over every ability of every single creature that exists, like all of this stuff. I'm not going to talk about those. What I am going to cover are the bold abilities, the things that are generally general abilities that you will fly on multiple, or that you will find on multiple cards, things that say like flying, lifelink, etc., etc. There's a ton of examples, and I'm going to cover all of them. I'm going to divide these into three basic categories. You've got your attacking abilities, you have your evasive abilities, and then you have your utility abilities. So let's just kind of go right down the list and start with lifelink. Basically, lifelink is lifesteal. It means any damage that this creature deals, you get as life. So if Bishop Soldier attacks and deals 2 damage, you get 2 damage added to your life total. If Daybreak Chaplain blocks and blocks a creature, it still deals 1 damage to that creature, and you get 1 added to your life total, etc., etc. It's basically lifesteal. Next, we have Vigilance. That would be on something like Danitha, or any number of other creatures. There are non-white creatures that have Vigilance, but I think there's a disproportionate number of white creatures that have it. You'll see a lot of white creatures with Vigilance. Vigilance basically means that when this creature attacks, it does not tap, which means it can still block on the same turns that it would be attacking. Most creatures, they can either attack or block on any given turn. They can't do both. If they have Vigilance, Vigilance will allow them to still block because they don't tap from attacking. Very, very useful. Also means that they're essentially immune to stuff like Seal Away when they attack, because they don't get tapped from attacking. So very, very useful ability. Next, we have First Strike. First Strike. First Strike basically adds an additional damage phase. And what it means is that creatures with First Strike will hit their opponents before their opponents have a chance to hit them back. So, say this Sunhome Stalwart with First Strike attacks this Cavalry Drillmaster. They both have 2 power, so if it weren't for First Strike, Sunhome Stalwart and Cavalry Drillmaster would kill each other because they both have 2 power and they both have 2 or less toughness. However, because Sunhome Stalwart has First Strike, he's going to deal his 2 damage to Cavalry Drillmaster first. Cavalry Drillmaster will then die, and Sunhome Stalwart will stick around. That's basically what First Strike is. It adds an extra damage phase where it checks to see if the damage that your First Strike creature is dealing is enough to kill its opposing creature, whatever is being blocked, and if so, it will live. The other creature just doesn't even get a chance to attack. Similar to First Strike is Double Strike, and this is one of my favorite. This might actually be my favorite ability in the game. Double Strike allows a creature to attack twice. Once during the First Strike phase, and once during the regular damage phase. So basically, it allows them to attack twice during the same turn. And they will always attack twice. It's not an optional thing. If it has Double Strike, it will attack twice. You can't be like, I want to attack here and then attack again. No, it's a mandatory thing, but basically it allows them to hit twice. That means that this Zatulpa does not hit for 4 damage per turn. He hits for 8 damage per turn. It can be a very, very powerful ability, especially when coupled with stuff like Quendi that allows you to suddenly give your creatures Double Strike out of nowhere. Suddenly, the amount of damage that's coming in is far higher than what an opponent was expecting. One of my favorite abilities in the game. So next, let's talk about Death Touch. Speaking of damage, Any damage that a death touch creature deals to an opposing creature is enough to kill them. Period. If this hired poisoner deals 1 damage to an opponent's, I don't know, Gulta, that's a 12/12 creature, the Gulta will still die. The hired poisoner will die too. It doesn't make them immune to taking damage themselves, but it will instantly kill the Gulta. And it's very, very good. It's great for using cheap creatures like this hired poisoner to take down big, powerful creatures that are far more valuable. And it also can make your opponent really hesitate to attack because they don't want to trade their big, powerful stuff for your dinky little hired poisoners that are worth almost nothing. So very, very cool ability. Also, Death Touch plus First Strike is a brutal combo because basically words are hard. Death Touch plus First Strike is enough to basically allow you to instantly kill anything that doesn't have First Strike, which is fantastic. After Death Touch, we have Trample. Trample is basically, I'm going to run my opponent over. So any damage that is left over when a trample creature gets blocked is dealt to your opponent. So say, for example, you have this Carnage Tyrant that has 7 power, and say it attacks and it's blocked by this Charging Tuscadon that has 4 toughness. Well, Carnage Tyrant with its 7 power is dealing 3 more damage than this Charging Tuscadon's toughness, so that extra 3 damage would be dealt directly to the player. So think of it as basically running over whatever's blocking it and just continuing on. It just keeps going. That's Trample. Finally, our last attacking-related ability, and this is one that I didn't really know where to put it. You could make an argument that it's under attacking. You could make an argument that it's under utility. You could even make an argument that it's under evasive. But I put it under attacking. Basically, what haste does is any creature with haste does not have summoning sickness. So as soon as it hits the battlefield, it can attack on that same turn, which can be very powerful if your opponent isn't expecting it. If they don't think they have any damage coming in because you have no monsters on the field, and then suddenly you slam a Charging Monstersaur and hit them in the face for 5, that can be a little scary. So it can be a very useful ability, especially in very aggressive decks. You will usually find it in fairly aggressive decks. It's almost all going to be red creatures that have haste. You can see just looking through, there's very, very few things that don't have or that aren't red, at least partially red, that have haste. So very, very useful and kind of a cool ability for burst damage. So now let's talk about evasive abilities. Words are hard, guys. Evasive abilities are basically things that mean it's hard for your opponent to block or get rid of the things that have them. So the first example that comes to mind is flying. Flying basically means that the only creatures that can block something with flying are other things with flying. Because if a flying creature is attacking, the guy on the ground is not going to be able to reach it. Pretty straightforward. So a Pegasus Courser could block a Skyline Scout only gets flying sometimes, but one of these guys could block one of these guys. But if one of the 2 creatures doesn't have flying, can't happen. On the other hand, a creature with flying is still able to block a ground creature. That's fine. They can fly down and block the soldier on the ground. It's just that the soldier on the ground can't jump up and fly into the air to block them when they're trying to fly overhead and attack. Pretty straightforward. Next would be menace. Menace means that a creature with menace can only be blocked by 2 or more creatures. So if this 2-headed zombie is attacking, and your opponent only has 1 creature on the board, that 1 creature by itself cannot block the 2-headed zombie. So it makes creatures with menace a bit harder to block. Next we have indestructible. There we go. And indestructible is pretty much what it sounds like. It means your creature cannot be destroyed by damage. So something like a Phylactery Lich or a Zetalpa, any damage that they take is not enough to kill them. There's a couple of things that will allow you to get indestructible on a creature. Adanto Vanguard's a good example. You can pay 4 life, and Adanto Vanguard becomes indestructible until the end of the turn. Now, it's important to note what indestructible does not protect you from. Indestructible does not protect you from exile effects, because that is not something that would cause them to die. That is something that would cause them to be exiled. So you are still open to things like Ixalan's Binding or Conclave Tribunal or Seal Away. Indestructible will not prevent those from happening. Indestructible also does not protect from minus abilities. And what I mean by that is stuff like Moment of Craving that says target creature gets -2/-2. That is technically not dealing damage. That is altering the stat line. So Moment of Craving would still kill a creature if it drops them low enough. If it would drop them below 0, they will still die, even if they have Indestructible. What Indestructible does prevent you from dying to are stuff like, I don't know, Lightning Bolt. That's not how you spell lightning. Stuff like Lightning Strike, or Wizard's Lightning, or Deafening Clarion, or anything that deals damage, or it will also prevent you from anything that says destroy. If it says destroy target creature, that will also be prevented with Indestructible. It means that they're immune to those types of things. They'll still technically take the damage, it just won't kill them. Finally, the last evasive ability is Hexproof. Hexproof is also one of my favorites. It basically means that a creature with Hexproof cannot be the target of opponents' spells or abilities. They cannot target your creature, something like this Carnage Tyrant. A player or permanent with Hexproof can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. Now, there are 2 key parts to that. First of all, it's the your opponents part. You can still target your own creatures with spells and abilities, but your opponent can't. So if you, for example, have a Carnage Tyrant that is hexproof, and you drop on it a Blanchwood Armor, that's a pretty strong combo, because you can still target your own creature, they just can't. The other key part of that is that the creature cannot be the target. So, for example, if we have something like a Cleansing Nova, this does not target a creature. It just kills everything. So, it doesn't mean that they're immune to being destroyed. It doesn't mean they're indestructible. Well, indestructible is an actual ability. It doesn't mean that they're immortal. There are still ways to get rid of hexproof creatures. They could still take damage and die in combat, or they could be killed by something that doesn't specifically target them. But it makes them a lot harder to get it makes them a lot harder to get rid of. Pretty common ways to get rid of hexproof creatures like Carnage Tyrant are stuff like Board Wipes, Cleansing Nova, Deafening Clarion, etc. Settle the Wreckage is another good example, because Settle the Wreckage targets the player, not the creature. But they can be pretty tricky to get rid of, and it can make them very annoying, especially to a very kind of control-heavy deck that focuses a lot of removal and stuff like that. So now let's get into the utility abilities. First of all, I want to go with Ascend. And Ascend's kind of a weird one, because it sort of explains itself on the card. So basically, there's this thing called the City's Blessing. And basically the idea is, as long as you control 10 or more permanents, you then get the City's Blessing. And you get it for the rest of the game. It doesn't matter. Once you have it, if you drop below 10 permanents, it makes no difference. So permanents include lands, creatures, enchantments, any of that kind of stuff. Those are all permanents. So basically, in order to get the City's Blessing, you have to have 10 permanents, and you have to have a creature on the board that says Ascend. Once you ascend, you get it. And with the City's Blessing, you then get extra benefits from all of these Ascend spells. So, for example, Sky Marcher Aspirant then gets flying. Radiant Destiny means that creatures you choose, instead of just getting +1/+1, they also get Vigilance, and so on and so forth. So that's Ascend. And that one's a little weird because it kind of explains it on the tin, but not really, sort of, kind of, yeah. Anyway, so City's Blessing, basically Ascend just means you get the City's Blessing if you have at least 10 permanents, and then you get it for the rest of the game, even if they're gotten rid of. Okay, next, Mentor. This is an ability that I also very strongly considered putting into attacking, but I decided to put it into utility instead. When you have a creature that has Mentor, such as this Blade Instructor, basically whenever you attack with that creature, you can then put a permanent +1/+1 counter on another creature that is also attacking at the same time. So, for example, say you're attacking with this Blade Instructor and this Sunhome Stalwart. The Blade Instructor could mentor the Sunhome Stalwart. Now, it is important to note you can only put that +1/+1 counter on a creature that is attacking that also has less power. So the Blade Instructor could mentor the Sunhome Stalwart, because this guy's at 3 power, and this one's at 2. But the Stalwart could not mentor the Blade Instructor, because this one has higher power. So it only works on creatures that have, you can only mentor a creature that is lower in power than the mentee must be weaker than the mentor. Let's just put it that way. But it can also lead to some pretty ridiculous stuff. You can turn your army of little 1/1s into an army of 2/2s, and then suddenly they're a lot more formidable. But anyway, next, let's talk about Convoke. So Convoke is a mechanic that is very strong right now in Selesnya, in green and white. And basically what Convoke is you can use your creatures to essentially become mana for the spell by tapping them. So say we have this Conclave Tribunal. This Conclave Tribunal is 4 mana. It is a converted mana cost of 4. 3 of any color and 1 white. If you had on the board 4 white creatures, you could tap them instead of your lands to play this Conclave Tribunal. If you have Pause from Reflection, you could do the same thing, except you need to make sure you still have at least 1 green. Basically, when you tap a creature for Convoke, it will generate mana of its color. So if you were to tap Flight of the Equinox for convoking a different spell, it would generate white mana, not red. Pretty straightforward. Essentially, it allows you to play things with Convoke much faster than you might be able to otherwise, because you don't have to rely only on lands. You can also use your creatures to pay for them. And you don't lose those creatures, you just tap them. Okay, next up, we have kind of a 2-part. We have Defender. Defender is one of the few abilities in the game that is not actually a positive ability. Defender means that the creature cannot attack. You're pretty much always going to see it on walls, on defensive creatures like Wall of Mist, or Electrostatic Field, or Wall of Vines. These are creatures that are defensive. They're meant to block, and that's it. They don't attack. To go along with Defender, we also have Reach, and actually this Grappling Sundew happens to have it. What Reach means is that it can block something with flying. So even though the creature itself doesn't have flying, it can still block something with flying. And you will see that on things that are not just defenders. Things like this giant spider is not a defender, but it can reach flying creatures. Crawl Harpooner has Reach. Basically, Reach means that it can block flying creatures, even though it doesn't have flying itself. Finally, the last ability is Flash Utility. Flash means that you can play that card at any time as if it were an instant. So, for example, we've got like this Dire Fleet Poisoner. Normally, you can only play creatures during your second and first main phase. Flash, since this creature has Flash, you can play it in the middle of your opponent's combat phase, right before blockers are attacked. And since this thing has Death Touch, they attack, and suddenly you flash in this Direfleet Poisoner, take the block, and kill off their big, powerful creature. Or maybe you are waiting to do something. Say you've got a counter spell in hand. You're playing blue, and you plan to counter their thing, but they don't play anything over the course of their turn that's worth countering. Maybe at the end of the turn, since you have a little bit of mana left over, you flash in a Merfolk Trickster, etc., etc. Flash basically means that you can play a card at any time, even though it is the type of card that you would normally not be able to play at any time, such as a creature or an enchantment or whatever. So that's Flash. And I think that's all the abilities that are actually in standard, excuse me, that are actually in standard right now. There will possibly be more coming when the new set drops in early January, I think late January is when the next set comes out. But this video is current as of December 2018, so there you go. Guys, I think that is going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, you know what to do. Links in the description below, so check that out as well. Otherwise, my friends, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.